She thought she would always be alone. Then a human sat beside her without judgment. The alarm tore through the station before I had even opened my eyes. Red light spilled across the walls of my quarters, pulsing in time with a siren that meant only one thing on Kalis 9, a hull breach somewhere on the lower ring. I was on my feet before the second wave of the alarm finished sounding, my claws already curling into the emergency harness beside my bed. 3 years on this station had taught me that hesitation was the one thing none of us could afford. My name is Vresha, of the Ketri Ossuary Clade, though almost no one on this station used my full name. To most of them I was simply the gray one, the alien with the fading shoulder, the quiet one who ate alone and answered questions with as few words as possible. I had built my life around that quiet. I had built it around being forgettable, but the moment that siren began, none of that mattered. Forgettable or not, I still had a duty, and duty does not wait for comfort. I ran through the corridor, my breath sharp in my throat, and joined the stream of crew moving toward the lower ring access point. Sparks were falling from a cracked conduit overhead, and somewhere below us I could hear metal groaning under pressure it was never built to survive. A voice came over the comm system, tight and controlled, belonging to the station's chief engineer. All non-essential personnel to the upper ring. Engineering team to Bay 4. We have a coolant line rupture near Reactor 2. If it reaches the core housing, we lose the whole ring. I was not engineering crew. I had no reason to go toward Bay 4. And yet my legs carried me there anyway, because I recognized that voice, and because somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew whose face I would find when I arrived. Marcus was standing at the center of the chaos, sleeves pushed up, sweat cutting clean lines through the dust on his forehead. He had a tool in each hand, and 3 panels open around him, and he was shouting instructions to 2 junior technicians who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. When he saw me, he did not look surprised. He looked relieved, the way a person looks when a missing piece finally shows up. "Vray, I need another set of hands that won't shake," he said, tossing me a sealant unit without waiting for me to agree. "The line is failing behind panel 6. If we don't get pressure back under control in the next 4 minutes, this whole section vents into space." I did not ask why he trusted me with something this dangerous, when most of the crew barely trusted me to hold a door. There was no time for that question, and some part of me already suspected I would not like how simple his answer would be. We worked side by side, the 2 of us pressed into a space barely wide enough for either of us alone. He called out numbers, I fed him tools, and every few seconds, the whole wall shuddered, as the pressure behind it fought to escape. I could feel the vibration of it in my teeth. I had felt this kind of fear before, once, a long time ago, on a ship that did not survive it. My hands wanted to freeze the way they had frozen then. I forced them to keep moving instead. "Talk to me," Marcus said, without looking up from the wiring in front of him. "Tell me something. Anything. Just keep talking so I know you're still with me, and not somewhere else in your head." I did not understand at first why he wanted words instead of silence. Then I realized he had noticed something in my breathing, some old fear rising to the surface, and he was trying to pull me back before it swallowed me whole. "On my last ship," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "there was a breach much like this one. I was younger. I did not move fast enough." "You're moving plenty fast now," he said. "Hand me the clamp." I handed him the clamp. The wall shuddered again, harder this time, and one of the junior technicians cried out as a spark caught the edge of her sleeve. Marcus turned without a wasted motion, put the fire out with 2 slaps of his glove, and turned right back to the wiring as if nothing had happened. 60 seconds, he said. "Vray, hold this exactly where it is. Do not let it move, no matter what the ship does." I held it. My arms ached with the strain of keeping perfectly still while the deck trembled beneath us, but I did not let go. Somewhere in that minute, I stopped thinking about the ship I had lost. I stopped thinking about the gray mark on my shoulder and what it meant to everyone who looked at it. I only thought about the clamp in my hands and the man beside me who had handed me a task instead of a judgment. The pressure alarm cut off so suddenly that the silence afterward felt like its own kind of noise. Marcus let out a breath and sat back against the wall, and for a moment, none of us said anything at all. The 2 technicians hugged each other, laughing the shaky laugh of people who had just realized they were still alive. I simply stood there, my hands still trembling slightly, staring at the sealed panel, as if it might tell me what had just happened to me. "You did well," Marcus said, looking at me for the first time since the crisis began. "Better than well. You didn't freeze." "I wanted to," I admitted, and it was strange how easily the truth came out of me in that moment. "I have wanted to freeze for 3 years." He did not offer sympathy, and he did not offer pity. He simply nodded, like a man accepting a fact rather than reacting to a wound, and said, "Yeah, that sounds about right for someone carrying what you're carrying." We were called to the debrief an hour later, along with the rest of the response crew, and it was there that the station commander, a sharp-eyed woman named Grace Whitfield, told us what had actually happened. It had not been an accident. Sensors had picked up a small vessel matching no registered pattern, moving close to the station's shielded side moments before the rupture began. Someone, or something, had tried to force a breach deliberately, and the coolant failure was either a cover for something larger or a first attempt that had failed. "We don't know their intentions," Grace said, pacing in front of the room. "We don't know their species, and our long-range scans show at least 2 more vessels approaching from the outer belt. Until we understand what we're dealing with, everyone stays on high alert. No one goes anywhere alone. No one goes anywhere alone." The words landed on me strangely, because alone was the only way I had gone anywhere for 3 years. It had never once been ordered. It had simply become who I was. That night, the observation deck was not empty. Half the station seemed too anxious to sleep, and small groups had gathered near the windows to watch for movement among the stars, as if watching hard enough could stop whatever was coming. I found a space at the far end, away from the murmuring crowd, and sat with my legs pulled close, my eyes on the dark. Marcus found me there again, the way he always did, though this time he did not sit down right away. He stood beside the rail for a moment, watching the same stars I was watching, and then lowered himself onto the bench beside me without asking permission, the way he had done every night for months. "You're thinking about the ship again," he said. It was not a question. "I keep thinking that whatever is coming will be worse than that day," I said, "and that when it comes, I will freeze again, and more people will die because of it." "You didn't freeze today." Today was different. Today I was not the one responsible for keeping others alive. I was only holding a clamp. He turned to look at me directly, the way he always did, without flinching from the gray mark on my shoulder, and without pretending it was not there either. "Vray, can I tell you something my grandmother used to say?" I nodded, though I did not know what a grandmother was in his species terms, only that it seemed to mean something important to him. She used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's carrying the fear and doing the work anyway. You've been telling yourself for 3 years that freezing once means you'll always freeze. That's not courage or cowardice. That's just fear, talking louder than the truth. The truth is that 6 of my hatch siblings did not survive because of me. The truth, he said gently, is that 6 of your hatch siblings did not survive a disaster that was not your fault, and you were the one who happened to be standing closest when it happened. Those aren't the same sentence, even if they feel like they are. I wanted to argue with him. I had wanted to argue with anyone who dared say such a thing for 3 years, and yet every time he said it, some quiet part of me listened a little more closely than the last time. Before I could answer, the alarm sounded again, sharper and more urgent than before. This time it was not a mechanical failure. Grace's voice came over the comm, tight with a kind of controlled fear I had not heard from her before. "All crew to stations. Unknown vessels have entered weapons range. This is not a drill." The observation deck emptied in seconds, crews scattering toward their assigned posts. But Marcus grabbed my arm before I could move. "Come with me," he said. "Engineering is going to need every hand we can get if those ships try what I think they're about to try." We ran together through corridors that had gone eerily quiet, past sealed doors and flickering emergency lights, until we reached the same section we had repaired only hours earlier. Marcus pulled up a display showing 3 unfamiliar vessels closing in on the station's weakest point, the very section where the coolant line had failed. "They knew exactly where to hit us," he said, half to himself. "That rupture wasn't random. Someone mapped our weak points before they ever attacked." Then they will try the same section again, I said, understanding rising in me like cold water. They believe it is already compromised, which means if we can reinforce it before they strike, we take away their advantage. Marcus was already pulling equipment from the wall, moving with the same fast, sure hands I had watched hours before. I need someone who can hold a structural brace steady while I weld it in place, in a space too tight for a full suit. That's you, Vray. I trust your hands more than anyone else on this station. I did not have time to wonder why those words affected me the way they did. I only had time to follow him into the narrow maintenance shaft, my body pressed against cold metal, my claws gripping a brace that would mean the difference between a hull that held and a hull that did not. The station shook around us as the first strike hit somewhere on the far side of the ring. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere above us, I could hear Grace's voice giving orders, calm and controlled even as the whole station trembled with each new impact. "Hold it steady," Marcus said, sparks flying from his welding tool inches from my hands. "Just like this morning. You didn't freeze then. Don't freeze now." I did not freeze. My hands ached, and my arms burned with the strain, but I held the brace exactly where it needed to be, even as the deck shuddered beneath us with the force of another impact somewhere close. I found, somewhere in that fear, that I was no longer thinking about the ship I had lost 3 years ago. I was thinking only about the man beside me, the weld sealing beneath his hands, and the fact that if I let go now, it would not only be my failure, it would be his as well, and for reasons I could not yet name, I found that unbearable in a way my own fear had never been. The brace held, the weld sealed. Marcus pulled back, breathing hard, and checked the readout on the wall display. "That's it," he said. "That section will hold now, no matter what they throw at it." A final impact rocked the station, further away this time, and then silence fell, the kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed, rather than before one arrives. Grace's voice came over the comm a moment later, steadier now. "Unknown vessels are retreating. Repeat, they are retreating. All crew stand down from combat stations, but remain on alert." Marcus sat back against the wall of the shaft, and for a long moment neither of us moved. My hands were still shaking, but this time it was not entirely from fear. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." "You did it," I said. "I only held what you asked me to hold." "That's not nothing, Vray. That's not nothing at all." He looked at me then, in a way he had never quite looked at me before, and something in his expression made the gray mark on my shoulder feel less like a sentence, and more like simply a part of my history, something that had happened, rather than something that defined everything I would ever be. In the days that followed, the station slowly returned to something like normal, though nothing about it felt entirely the same to me. Crew who had once avoided my eyes now nodded to me in the corridors, some of them even thanking me for what I had done during the attack. I did not know how to hold that kind of attention, after 3 years of trying to disappear into corners, but I found that I no longer wanted to disappear the way I once had. Grace called me into her office a week later, and I expected some kind of formal review, the sort of meeting that always ended with my transfer request being quietly filed and forgotten. Instead, she slid a data pad across her desk toward me. "Marcus put in a formal request," she said. "He wants you assigned to his engineering team permanently. Says you're the steadiest hand he's worked with in years, and that steady hands are worth more to this station than a clean record." I stared at the pad for a long moment, unable to find words. Somewhere in my Clade's teaching, there had always been a rule that failure marked a person forever, that the gray on my shoulder meant I would never again be trusted with anything that mattered. And yet here was a datapad telling me that someone believed the opposite, someone who had watched me hold a brace steady while the whole station shook around us, and had decided that was worth more than any old verdict written on my skin. "I accept," I said, and my voice did not shake at all. That night, I returned to the observation deck one more time, though for the first time in 3 years, I did not go there to be alone. I went there because I knew, without needing to check, exactly who would be waiting on the bench near the far window, watching the same stars we had watched together through every crisis that had brought us this far. Marcus looked up as I approached, and he did not ask why I had come, or whether I wanted to sit beside him instead of at a distance. He simply moved over slightly, making room, the way he had done every single night since the first time he sat down beside me without judgment. "Told you," he said, as I settled beside him. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. You just needed someone to remind you of that until you believed it yourself." I looked out at the stars, at the same endless dark that had once felt like the only honest reflection of how alone I truly was, and found that it no longer felt that way at all. The gray mark on my shoulder was still there, and would likely remain there for the rest of my life, a permanent record of a day I could not undo, and people I could not save. But it no longer felt like the only thing anyone would ever see when they looked at me. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for sitting beside me that first night. I do not think I ever properly said that." "You didn't have to," Marcus said. "I wasn't doing it for thanks. I was just doing what anyone should have done a long time before I got here." We sat together in silence after that. The good kind, the kind that asks nothing and offers everything, simply by being shared. I had spent 3 years believing that I would carry my grief alone for the rest of my life, that no one could ever look at what I carried without turning away. I understand now that I was wrong, not because the grief disappeared, but because someone finally chose to sit beside it with me instead of asking me to hide it, and in doing so, showed me that I had never truly needed to be alone at all.